Hello, everyone. I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook, and on behalf of the entire GeekWire team, welcome to today's virtual roundtable. We've got a great session in store today. 2020 has definitely been a year like no other. Empty basketball arenas, restaurants with no guests. For those running businesses, it has certainly been a year of grit and resilience. And that's why we wanted to finish GeekWire's virtual event series this year with inspiring stories from those who've endured and even thrived during one of the most challenging periods in history. We'll introduce our featured speakers in just a few minutes. But first, we wanted to thank our partners on today's event, Seattle Bank and Davis Wright Tremaine. Seattle Bank and DWT are not only sponsors of GeekWire, they are longtime advisors and partners. And frankly, we could not have made it through our own pivot this year, including a virtual event like this, without their support. So a big thanks to Seattle Bank and DWT. And since this is a year in which every type of business has had to transform themselves, we're going to kick it off today hearing from our great partners at DWT and Seattle Bank. So I'd like to welcome Craig Baker, a partner with Davis Wright Tremaine, and Josh Williams, who's the EVP and Chief Banking Officer at Seattle Bank. Craig and Josh, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys, and it's pretty interesting here when I look at both DWT and Seattle Bank, and I think about GeekWire's year, because you guys have both been, and your firms have been trusted confidants and advisors to us. And as I said, every business has had to pivot this year. So I wanted to just start off and ask both of you, what have been the biggest pivots that you've had to make as organizations this year? And Josh or Craig, hop on in.
Josh, why don't you go ahead first?
Sure. Thanks, Craig. Well, John, yeah, great to be here. And first, thanks for all the work that GeekWire has done in supporting the community this year, really getting useful information out. It's been, I think, a great resource. Clearly supporting our clients and our employees as we try to envision how to do business in a post-COVID scenario really was the overarching theme for us, like most businesses. I think probably the most specific element of that really revolved around how we supported the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, as many of us have come to fondly know that. And, so really for us, that was both on a really from a financial, technical, and people standpoint, really stepping up and doing something that hadn't been done in a way that could get the money and support out to businesses as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Josh, and I got to give a shout out from the GeekWire team, because this actually ties into our own pivot at GeekWire, where we were scrambling in the spring when the Paycheck Protection Program was announced with our existing bank, and we're struggling with that. And certainly made the pivot ourselves to come and partner with you, and because we had the personal relationship, I would very much thank you for your great support and resources as we connected with you on that. And that was certainly a wild time when we were trying to figure that out. Craig, what about on your end at Davis Wright Tremaine? I know that you had recently moved into new office space. Gosh, when was it? Fall of 2019?
Yeah, Thanksgiving 2019. So it's been, first of all, I want to echo everything Josh said and how delighted we are that GeekWire has been able to pivot and continues to sail through the headwinds of this. I mean, I think for us, it is, we have, law firms have taken sort of dip toes in remote work. And so we had the tools, but maybe not the culture to work remotely among our lawyers. But the two things I think that were difficult and important pivots for us to make is one, making sure that everyone else within our organization could work remotely. And so having staff get laptops and all of the different ways that our IT and our security folks had to deal with suddenly everybody working remotely, and obviously that's a huge issue for us as a law firm. And then I think the other thing which we're continuing to work through, and I think has been the hardest part of the pivot, is how do we change our culture or maintain our culture through the change to sort of remote or hybrid work. And that's going to be an ongoing discussion, both in terms of the the way that our office space is organized, but in particular, how do we create those collisions and connections among each other to grow and better serve our clients, as well as growing the next generation of talent within our organization, which is what I think a lot of us are most worried about in the remote work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're certainly going to be talking about talent and team and culture here in the session today. And again, great thanks to Seattle Bank and Davis Wright Tremaine for supporting this session and supporting GeekWire throughout this tumultuous year. So thank you so much. And we'll connect with you both here in the VIP session following our chat. Now I'm really excited to introduce our panel for the day. First off, I would like to welcome Alisha Valavanis. She is the General Manager and CEO of the Seattle Storm, the 4-time WNBA champions, and Brian Canlis, who is the co-owner of Canlis, the award-winning restaurant, which is lovely perched above Lake Union in Seattle, which has gone through a number of pivots throughout the year. Welcome, Alisha and Brian. It's great to see you both.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, when we were talking about putting together this session, we were trying to find entrepreneurs and business leaders who kind of really embody the transition and transformation this year. And I couldn't think of two better folks to talk to. So very much appreciate you joining us here today. And as I mentioned in the opening remarks, this has really been a year like no other. So I just want to start with a very basic question. Talk about this year. How are you coping?
How are you? Go for it, Brian.
You first. You're the champion.
Champions first,
Thanks,
Alisha.
man.
Champions first.
Yeah, I mean, I think like everyone else, it's been an incredibly challenging year. There are highs, there are lows. Really just kind of staying super close to family and loved ones. But the conversation prior here around pivot, I mean, that's the word. And I think we've all, through the course of 2020, really focused on areas where we can pivot, whether it's from a business standpoint or a personal standpoint, to get through this year.
Yeah. Hey, Alisha, I've got a basketball question before we go any further.
All right.
In fact, this was an audience question. And hey, shout out to the audience here. We got amazing questions, making my job very easy today. I'm going to try to get to as many as possible. But as we said, pivot is kind of the word of the year. What is pivot in the context of basketball, and is it still used as a basketball term? Somebody actually really wanted to know that from the audience. So let's get the very basic definition.
We'll go very literal here. First of all, yes. John, I know you're a baller, so you know the pivot, but it's when you are in position with the ball and you are actually moving your footwork to not travel. So you've got to pivot to actually create space and handle the ball without traveling.
Awesome. Well, I think a great analogy for this year. Brian, let's toss it over to you. How are you coping and making it through, as you've probably gone through I would say the biggest transformation in the restaurant's storied history?
Yeah, it's let's see. I think it's easy to focus on what's been hard. I think it's great to focus on what's been wonderful. And there's been so much that's been wonderful. I mean, we did the same thing for 70 years, and we always dreamed about opening other businesses, or what would it be like to do this, and now we've got to every wild and crazy and creative idea we've ever had. We've done it. We've opened 11 different business models in the last 9 months, and I had a baby during that time. So it's been chaos and wonderful confusion. But it's given us a chance to exercise pieces of our brains and our bodies that we never thought we'd have the chance to do. And because of that, it's been exhilarating and invigorating. Yes, we also keep our eye on the amount of hurt and pain and the businesses that are closing, and what is our responsibility to lift up and to inspire and to continue to turn towards each other and not away. But we have just looked at this year as an opportunity to try things for the first time and to be playful with that. And we're thankful for that.
Absolutely. And we'll get into some of those 11 business models and what worked and what hasn't. But where are you drawing the startup energy, the entrepreneurial energy, or the inspiration from to actually drive that? Where's that coming from?
We get asked that a lot, and it's been here the whole time. I think fine dining, and we would define fine dining as the most considered form of dining, where you throw heart and soul into every tiny detail. I don't think fine dining has to do with price or dressing up. Fine dining is the most considered experience. And so what it takes to do a fine dining restaurant, which is the world's worst business model, and to keep it successful is, you'd be surprised at how much creativity and effort and pivoting goes into those first 69 years of our existence. We would shut the restaurant down for a week every year, fly our executives out of the state, sometimes out of the country, and put a picture of the restaurant on the wall and literally say, okay, nothing is sacred but our mission statement. How are we going to reinvent the entire restaurant this year to stay relevant? And being relevant as a restaurant is like an oxymoron, because old and successful restaurants don't really exist anymore. So we would constantly breathe life and creativity into the old Canlis, the first 69-year Canlis. And we built a swimming pool in our parking lot last summer and had a dance party of 1,000 people a night. And we turned every surface of our restaurant white last New Year's Eve, walls, floors, ceilings, and had a white wig party. We've been doing things that are a little bit nuts for the last 15 years inside the fine dining framework. And it really set us up for the post-fine dining framework.
Absolutely. So it sounds like the culture of entrepreneurialism was already there and thriving.
Yeah, it was essential to get as far as we got.
Absolutely. Alisha, in a championship year for the Storm, go Storm, great job. What has been the biggest lesson that you think you've taken away from this year as you apply your own leadership to the organization?
Well, thank you. It was an incredibly challenging environment to win a championship, but I was excited to kind of see the framing of this conversation today, because I think resilience is something that we talked about all year long. For me, the biggest takeaway was probably just kind of the inspiration from the players of the WNBA. And it continues to motivate and to drive me in my work. It was an unbelievable kind of task to pull off a safe bubble by the WNBA. But then you think about the work that the players did on and off the court. So for me, really, the greatest takeaway was just kind of watching the players, their work on the court. We were fortunate to win the championship, but the collective WNBA work off the court to really drive change. And the players very early on made it clear that they were going to play this year, and it was going to be about social and racial injustices in this country, righting that wrong. And it was powerful to watch it play out through the course of the season.
Is there something that you think will, and this was a question we got a lot from the audience in various forums, is there something that you learned or that you think is a takeaway, and this can go to Brian, you or Alisha, that is going to be implemented going forward that you saw play out this year, and maybe it is the racial justice movement sticks for finally, and that becomes a real hallmark of the WNBA, or perhaps there's something else. Are there any things that you've seen that have occurred in 2020 in your own organizations that will stick through 2021 and are going to be longer term components of your businesses?
I would just say, on that, there's no question that this year we were able to pause long enough to really focus in on what mattered. And I think it was very clear to the WNBA, to the Seattle Storm, that we were going to be committed to our values and to action against those values. And so, as we played out the 2020 season, that was clear in the work off the court. That's going to continue. So no question that would be kind of the path forward.
Brian, what about for you? You mentioned the 11 businesses. I mean, I assume not all those 11 business models have been successful and not all of them are going to be sticking around, but Is there something from one of those, or perhaps something bigger that's going to be sticking around with Canlis?
I would say on like a global scale, it's funny. It's awesome being Alisha, because we talk about basketball a lot in this company, because the word pivot, which makes me want to die sometimes because it's so overused. And it was great like back in March, but when you pivot, everyone talks about the pivot, the other foot. I don't know which foot's which, but the one that stays still is the one that doesn't get a lot of glory, right? It's the other foot that's yapping around all over. And that's what that's what the media wants to cover. And that's what everyone wants to talk about is, where's your foot traveling? But we are talking all the time about what is the foot that's standing still. And to us, that's the mission statement of our company, which is to inspire all people to turn towards one another. And what this time has given us is even more confidence and freedom that if our one foot really is like planted firmly, we can do so many things with our pivot foot that are still who we are as a people, as a family, who we are as a brand. And it's been enlightening to discover the freedom that you can go do a stinking ridiculous bingo show and hang my brother from the ceiling on a harness over a famous piano player. And it works because the entire thing is rooted in who we are as a people and a company for 70 years and our mission statement. And so I think the pivoting only works if you know deeply who you are as an organization, and that never moves. And you stay planted. Yeah, that's been big for us.
That's great. I love you tying into the theme of the session here today so perfectly. That's great. Brian and Alisha, you guys actually share something in common. I think people might say, well, gosh, you got a restaurant owner and a professional sports team CEO on a panel. That's kind of odd. But, there are actually some interesting parallels beyond what you just mentioned in your own basketball analogies you use in the business. But Alisha, you have a twin sister, a former basketball teammate who's a close advisor and confidant, as identical twins can be. And Brian, your brother Mark is a key partner in Canlis with you. How have you drawn on family to help you navigate this year? Alisha, you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I'm from a big family. I'm actually one of 6, 2 sets of identical twin girls, which is wild. But you talked about my twin sister, Alexa. And the truth is, team started for me very, very early, and just kind of the power of a team. And I've really leaned on that heavily. I'm the only one in Seattle, so there's been a lot of FaceTime, a lot of connection there. But my twin sister is also a CEO. So we talk daily about what our teams are going through. And she's the CEO of a community foundation, so the work is different work. But really, at the end of the day, it's all about human beings. And right now, and we've already talked about it a little bit today, the team right now and what the team needs and all these individuals trying to work for whatever the product and service is. It's really about the culture and the team coming together. So we spend a lot of time talking about that and how you can foster that in such a unique environment where most people are home, and how you can take care of your culture and really focus on the human beings behind the work.
Yeah, Alisha, I've got a whole section coming up here on teams, so stay tuned because I've got some specific questions for you and Brian. Brian, how about you? I mean, family-owned business. You've got your brother by your side. What are the positives and maybe negatives of that as you've gone through this transformational year?
It's almost entirely positive. We are very differently skilled people, and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we know how to pull out the strengths in each other. And we're on each other's side. I think because we have, we disagree on things all day long, but again, like that mission statement or the core of who we are, we completely see eye to eye on. And so when that trust is there between the 2 lead executives of what we're actually getting out of bed for, why are we leaving our families at night, like what's the point of it all? What is our life's work? When those two things are aligned, then all of the other superfluous decisions, they don't matter. You fight them out and it's fine. And there's a confidence in being known and trusted by a family member that's really quite beautiful. Then there's my parents, which is a whole nother situation. I mean, they ran this place for 30 years. We bought it from them about 10 years ago. And yeah, we get all kinds of phone calls being like, boys, is this a good decision? And it's really something, but they're great. They sometimes take like you guys don't own the company anymore, but no, we're kind, but they have this great perspective and they think we're completely nuts. And then a week later, they're like, oh, that was fun. So it's actually been good for our family. It's brought us together. It's made our parents actually trust us more because every decision that we've made, they kind of doubted it first. And then they were like, oh, that did work. You guys are smart. And we're like, yeah, Mom, we're in our 40s. Like, we're not 7. So it's been fun. It's been challenging, but I wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, great perspective from both of you. Thank you for that. Let's just jump into the future for a moment where I think we all want to go and put 2020 in the rearview mirror. What is your best bet projection when we will see a packed basketball arena with Storm fans and a Canlis restaurant that's packed to the gills on a Saturday night?
That is a hard one to predict that.
We all want to know. We all want it. So
I think we're all incredibly hopeful as we hear the news come out about distribution of the vaccine. But it really is too soon to know when we can then safely return to an arena of 10,000 people. But hopefully in 21.
Yeah, I've every prediction that I've made along the way has been wrong. And I've learned that, it's a dangerous time to make predictions. Our hope is that in this summer sometime, there are people dining inside our building. That doesn't mean it's packed, maybe. That doesn't mean we can open up our private event spaces and have a party of 60 or 70. But gosh, we would sure love to not be. We built this yurt village out in our parking lot. And so we have another outdoor restaurant. And it's really beautiful. And there's fires and paths and yurts and trees. But we had like a bit of a windstorm last night. So we had 11 trees fall over into so I don't know, the things that I can add to my resume after this year, including like cutting down trees in the middle of service and like while serving wine. And we're ready to be back as a real restaurant, but we won't do it until it's the right time.
Yeah, Brian, something you said there resonated with me because it seems like from the outside that Canlis has gotten so much right in what you've done here over the past year. So you mentioned that you've got so many predictions wrong. I'm curious what you got wrong and what you learned from those things.
Yes, we most businesses, I don't know. I mean, I know one business well, and it's this one. But from what I hear out there in the world, it takes a while to make a business profitable and to make a business efficient. That obviously makes sense. We had to pivot so many times because of the CDC would change their mind, or the governor would change their mind, or now masks are required or they're not, or whatever restrictions were coming in, or we'd learn more about the virus, or we have to stay home or we don't, or so we had to keep evolving our business model to fit all the changes that were being thrown at us. Right, you've got PPP, which means you have to bring everybody back and give them jobs, and you have an 8-week period and then it was no, you have 16 weeks, and no, you have like the whole year, and so it was like, oh great, are we supposed to build a business model that employs everyone, or are we supposed to put people on unemployment and so they can take advantage of massive unemployment benefits? And all to say, none of our models made money. We've consistently like a banner of pride, just continue to lose money. But I don't think we don't measure success by whether we made money or not. We measure success on whether we fulfilled our mission statement or not. And so it's been an incredible year for our brand and for PR and for our community and for actually inspiring people and inspiring restaurants around this country to be creative and to not give up and to keep fighting. But without PPP money, we would be like in a dark place. So none of what we've done has been great business models. They've been great at keeping people employed. They've been great at inspiring a city. They've been great at being fun, but they're not profitable.
Has the PPP loan allowed you, so I guess how I'm reading that, has that allowed you to be more experimental and entrepreneurial?
100%. Oh yeah, because I had the government tell me, hey, I'm gonna basically help you out with labor, which is 40% of my costs, which allows me to be so much less profitable and still pay the rent and still pay my mortgage. So yeah, we were able to be way more wildly creative because we had that guarantee. What was hard is that the rules of PPP were changing all the time. I don't know if Craig's here. I don't blame Craig, but like it was confusing of the rules on getting it forgiven or not. Like those, we never had clarity until way later. And so we made decisions that weren't great based on how to get it forgiven. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it was a generous grant basically from the government, and it absolutely fueled the fire of our creativity and our boldness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we could talk to our friends at Seattle Bank and Davis Right to Remain. We certainly relied on them throughout that process to get great advice.
I said Craig, I meant Josh. But yeah.
Well, they both were working on that. So I wanted to transition just into teams. I mentioned that, and I know that's obviously important to both of you. Alisha, I'll start with you. For someone who once held the 3-point shooting record at Chico State, go Wildcats. I got to give a shout out to Todd Bishop, our co-founder here at GeekWire, his alma mater as well. In your management style, you like to talk a lot about the power of passing the ball. So a little bit of a irony there. And so my question for you is, as a leader over this past year where you've had to make a decision to pass, I'd like to have you elaborate on where you've had to make the decision to pass the ball versus where you as the CEO felt you needed to take the shot and how you navigated that.
Yeah, sure. You know, I think it's interesting in this context, as I look back on 2020 already, there's not been a time where it's been more critical to pass the ball to the people that you trust on your team because the lift was so heavy. And when I think about the front office, when I think about the team in the bubble, you know, the leaders continued to step up, but everyone on the team, really, this was the year that it was so critical that the team was established, the culture was established, that people understood they were trusted in the work they were doing, that they had the grace and the opportunity to test things. I mean, as Brian's talking, there were so many things that we tried as well to see if this was a way to keep fans engaged, test something new. And it was more critical than ever, I think, that we had a culture in place where people knew the ball was coming, shoot the shot. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to test. It's okay. You know, the losses are okay off the court as we test and try to get through this year and really stay committed to our core mission, our core values, and try to keep kind of the engagement of our primary stakeholders. I mean, it was very difficult to play in the bubble without the fans for these players and the coaches. So really wanted to work to keep Seattle engaged and to keep our fans and partners engaged. As Brian was sharing his story, you know, the stories of the businesses in Seattle were really motivating to our players and to our team, to the entire Seattle Storm organization. We knew the battle that was going on and is still going on for so many. And that was a source of motivation. And we were there in Bradenton playing for Seattle, playing for the city, playing for all those that are struggling through the 2020 year. So it was more critical than ever that we had a culture where you pass the ball and you take the shot, whether you make it or not.
Yeah, it sounds like you doubled down on the passing analogy. Were there any examples where you felt as the CEO that you had to take the shot because it was a big enough decision for the organization?
Yeah, there were a ton of decisions along the way where we were making different moves, whether it was around broadcast, whether it was around some significant moves with our fans and different platforms and technologies to support the engagement. So of course, along the way, and then on the court, with the coaches and with the team, there were a ton of decisions around supporting the players' initiatives. And we launched a Force for Change campaign that was really focused on, as I mentioned earlier, the players' interest in fighting racial injustices in this country. So of course there was a lot of space needed for that, but it was a team. It was the team, and we have incredible leadership with the ownership of the Seattle Storm all the way through, on and off the court.
So Brian, there were a lot of audience questions around this topic, and one of them was, what's the number one thing you did at Canlis over this past year to keep your team motivated and going?
Oh, I think we emphasize safety first. We made this place, like, the world didn't feel safe, and we wanted to make this building feel like a safe haven from that. And so we wanted to make this a place that you wanted to come to work, that you weren't afraid to come to work, that it felt like, and so the safety protocols that we put in place were kind of ahead of their time. They were stricter. They were our decision tree on what to happen if you feel sick, or like all of that. This place was locked down, and so people loved coming here because this was a place that was restorative. And I mean, that's who we are. We're a restaurant. Our whole point is to restore, I think, is where the word comes from originally. And so our employees became our guests in that way, and that this was a building and that people outside our team, outside these walls, were getting depleted, and they needed to come here to be filled back up again. And so that was done with, I think we used to do 1 hot meal a day here. We went to 3 hot meals a day. We increased everyone's medical insurance to 100%, so that there'd be no insecurity around medical. And we had a lot of late nights of, we have a large wine cellar. We got 25,000 bottles downstairs. So we drank a lot of wine and stayed up real late and brainstormed, and we were creative, and we gave people the freedom to say, since our first concept was a drive-through burger stand, our whole team knew, like, okay, nothing's off the table. And so people's voice mattered. There was no idea too ridiculous. The bingo show idea, which became a big hit, was, her name is Marin on my team. And it was completely her idea. It happened late one night. And she's like, "What, we should do a bingo show." And everyone was like, that's the right decision. Like, so people knew their voices mattered. They knew it was safe. They knew they were taken care of. I don't know. Does that help? Does that answer?
It does. Yeah. I want to come back to all the crazy ideas that you've explored. But before we leave this topic, Alisha, what has worked? What has not worked in terms of motivating your employees and staff during this crazy year?
I think it's been a tough environment for all of us. I mean, we are on Zoom. We're in a business, similarly to the restaurant business, where you're used to coming in and being a part of it. And the experience, so much of the experience for the front office is the collaboration. I mean, it is a team supporting a team. And so it's been very difficult. But of course, it's about commitment to the culture, commitment to, let's make a move. We're now on Zoom. What can we do? How can we engage our staff? How can we make sure we're committed to collaboration, new ideas, even in a difficult time? And so I think that's been something that we focused on, and some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. I think everyone has certain fatigues in the at-home Zoom environment. but we're committed. We're committed to hearing from our group, hearing from our team, what they need, what works, what doesn't work. So there have been a ton of learnings, I think, from this, and some, and you asked this question initially, some will carry on. I think we have learned about, the impact it has on people to be able to be closer to their families and closer at home. And so I think there will be some key learnings in terms of how we think about the flexible work from home policies and things like that. I think that's going to kind of sweep across the country as well. So lots of key learnings, but again, committed to the group, committed to the team, and listening to them on what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. So Brian, you've mentioned the bingo night. You've got the Crab Shack, burger meal delivery. Looks like you're wearing a jacket there for Canlis Community College, which is another wild. Yeah, there. Yes, indeed. So a bunch of wild and crazy ideas. You mentioned 11 of them that you've launched this year. What do you look at as the biggest success, and on the flip side, the biggest failure of those 11? And what could we see potentially grow into a larger part of your business?
Great question. So the biggest success.
Let me, before they do biggest success, what did you have the most fun doing, other than hanging your brother from the rafters? It sounds like.
Oh, the most fun was probably the drive-in theater, because I love drive-in theaters. I love movies. I don't know. I want to open a movie theater one day. If I had the money, I'd buy Cinerama and like create the greatest Seattle theater there is. But that was the most fun. That one lost a lot of money. But the most successful was also probably the biggest failure, which was the burger drive-through was so successful that we had over a mile-long line of cars when you added up the three directions, and people were waiting in line for a couple of hours. The neighborhood was so mad at us because we blocked traffic in every direction, and it was just chaos here. So the amount of energy and excitement around that idea was awesome, but it took all 100 of my staff members to pull it off, all making their full wages when you're selling an $11 burger is a disastrous business model. And we just weren't any good at being a burger stand. I mean, shock, right? But I think the greatest success, I think we're 11 ideas. I think this Silly Community College, because we built it, we were really losing a lot of money, and we decided we have to come up with an idea that the whole community could get behind. And we made a commitment to break even was our goal. Like, what if we just broke even? Like, wouldn't that be special? And if we advertise to the city, our goal is to break even. And if we go above breaking even, which would be amazing, we're going to donate all that money to Fair Start, to somebody else. And so it became this thing where we could actually give back to the community while also paying our bills. And so it was this great idea, and it worked. We had 12,000 students sign up for the college in those first week. And we were able to bring education and bring the community together, and it was so affordable. So it was $25, got you everything. And the entire city, it felt like the amount of letters and support and love that we got for this idea of just having a community college that was raising money for Fair Start, that paid our bills and kept our people employed, and also brought life and education to a city that was getting a little bit beat up unfairly in the news because we love this darn city so much. That was a win. We were able to raise a bunch of money for Fair Start. We were able to accomplish all our goals there. And it's probably the scariest thing we've ever done, because it was the most away from food, because we weren't selling anything. We were selling tuition, but it totally worked.
Absolutely. In fact, we did have an audience question specifically about the Canlis Community College, where people just wanted to know the backstory and how did it take root? How did that idea come to fruition?
Sure. I mean, so we had the Crab Shack, which was great, but then the smoke came and shut it down, and then the rain came and shut it down. And so we needed an idea for the fall, and my kids were getting ready to go back to school, or not actually, but this idea of back in school. And so we have this educational program at the restaurant called Canlis University. We've done it for 6 or 7 years, and it's just for our own staff. And it's 2 weeks long, and there's a valedictorian, and there's like a song, and we always lean into our themes maybe a little too heavily. And it's just about wine and food, and it's just a way of bringing everyone's education level higher. And so Canlis University happens every fall, and people love it. And so we've had a lot of guests hear about Canlis University and say, we want to, like, can we audit it? Can we? And we're like, no, you can't come audit. But we knew that we're like, wait a minute. We can't serve food anymore. It's too cold. We can't, like, the only thing we have left is our own knowledge to share. And what if we turn Canlis University into something outward facing, not inward facing? And that's when the idea hit of, it's not a university, it's a community college. What if we made it really affordable? What if we made it about celebrating the entire city? That was a long late night where Mark and I, on this wall behind me, you should have seen it. It was, we did a brainstorm session with yellow stickies, with probably 150 yellow stickies all over this wall of all the different things that a community college could become. And it really was, I mean, I think my favorite class was Dad Magic and Dad Jokes, where we had a real professional magician teaching magic while I taught really bad dad jokes. And like 1,000 people watched. Like, that's ridiculous. But it was so fun, that darn school.
Brian, I'd love an update on it. Are you at the point where you are donating profits to Fair Start, the great nonprofit here in the Seattle area?
We got to that point on the first day. So we covered all of our expenses for the 2 months of the college on day one. It was an amazing day.
Amazing. And, you know, one thing that strikes me with both Canlis and the Seattle Storm is your commitment to the Seattle community. You both have mentioned it. How do you balance that against everything else you're juggling?
I mean, for us, it's a part of the core mission, which Brian's talking about as well. So they're really, you know, every year we go into it and we talk about what we aim to kind of do off the court, what the impact work is. Certainly focused on youth, health, and wellness. This year it was very clear around our Force for Change initiatives. Fair Start, Angela Stoll, a good friend, and is doing incredible work there. As COVID hit, you know, we were excited to actually support that work as well with Fair Start. So, you know, it really is less about a balance and more about what is the commitment, what's the year look like. And it's so central to what we're doing that it's really just a part of everything. We talk about championships off the court. We talk about championships in the community, what we can do to kind of drive that impact work. This year it was clear there was a need around COVID support. And there was also this major focus for us around the racial justice work.
Absolutely. Brian, Seattle community, how are you balancing that commitment for the organization versus all the other challenges you're facing as an entrepreneur?
Oh, I think it just flows naturally out of, I think it makes it more fun. It's not work to include the community. If we're serious about the silly mission statement of inspiring people to turn towards one another, you can't do that with just people sitting at a table. It's got to be the vendors that walk in the door. It's got to be our neighbors down the street. It's got to be the organizations in the city that are making our city better. So, my grandfather set a standard. He helped build the cancer wing at Virginia Mason. And my parents helped build Fair Start. And like, so by the time my brothers and I came on board, we had this rich legacy of saying, like, don't you dare be insular. The life of this restaurant, a lot of the goodness of what it means to be a part of your community means facing outwards towards your city. And so that's just who we are, and we love it, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Love that. So inspiring. I'm buzzing through a bunch of audience questions here. One that applies to both of you in your respective industries. Somebody had asked, how do you see the restaurant industry changing as a result of the pandemic, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years? And Alisha, on your front, same for the sports industry.
I don't know. I think if I were I think at the very least, I think the world of chef as God and guest as someone who goes into the chef's temple and bows down and has a 30-course tasting menu and spends I think that is going to become less important. I hope it does. I hope the table becomes more about spending time with people in a restorative environment and less about stroking the egos of people trying to create fancy food. And that's kind of where fine dining started to go, and we've been resistant to that. And I hope restaurants become places that is about the specialness of going out again and being together with people. That's my hope. Maybe if I dream it, it'll come true. But I see that. What I hear from people out there is, I just want to be with people again around a table. I don't hear people saying, I just really need some foie gras, right? And so that, I hope that's where the industry goes, back to being places about community and relationships.
I think on our end, I mean, we're starting to see changes in arenas. I mean, as you think about technologies that support the experience, the user experience, I think a lot of that's going to play out differently moving forward, just in terms of safety and health. But I would agree. I mean, I think people want to be part of a community. The arena environment creates that community. Part of this, though, is also post kind of pandemic. We are all used to consuming a lot of our entertainment and things at home. And so how do we actually move to create that arena environment, but also bring the Seattle Storm to every household and create engaging environments for those that don't come to the arena? So I think it's going to be a balance of both things, really.
Great. Well, we're about coming to time here. This has been a fantastic discussion. Let's kind of end it looking into the future again. Maybe the Storm's playing in front of a packed crowd at Climate Pledge Arena. It's a busy Saturday night at Canlis in the future. What emotions are you going to feel as entrepreneurs and leaders of your organizations when you get to experience that again? And what does it say about what you've been through this year?
Well, I would just say, as I stood in Bradenton, the confetti was falling, but we didn't have our fans. We didn't have Seattle in the bubble with us. It was an overwhelming feeling. And I think we all look forward to being back in a building with our fans because this is Seattle's team and we play for Seattle. And it was wonderful. We felt so supported as we've talked today about all the community work. The Seattle Storm fan base and corporate partnership base were behind us in all of the work off the court. But I look forward to, the buzzer sounding and the fans going wild in the arena and being together again, because this is Seattle's team.
I love that. I want to come.
Done.
It's the same, that feeling when you travel, or at least when I was 18 or 19, I did the Europe thing and just left home and traveled for months. And it's the most exhilarating, exciting, new, like opening your eyes to a new world kind of thing. And yet it's hard and you're broke and you're hungry. And once you have to sleep on a bench because you're like, that happened too. And so that's felt like this year. And then there's that feeling of going home and crawling into your old bed and maybe it's not as sexy or as exciting or as amazing as the adventure was, but it feels right. I think that's how this dining room will feel again. It'll feel like crawling into your bed again and being like, yes. There's piano, there's a bartender shaking cocktails, and there's people laughing. We miss that. That is like a warm blanket that I can't wait to wrap myself in, hopefully soon.
Well said. I think we are all very much awaiting both that experience and a Storm game experience. So thank you to Alisha and Brian for joining us today. A great discussion. Remember to grab some grub from Canlis. Make sure to check out the next Storm game when we can safely gather. Also, a huge thanks to Seattle Bank and Davis Wright Tremaine for their support. Happy holidays to everybody, and we will see you again soon at the next GeekWire event. Virtual probably in the first half of the year, physical in the second half, we're hoping. Thanks everyone for joining. Take care.